And we're so excited today. One of my daughters is here today, and we're promoting her book, and it's called What's in the Closet, Miss Jenkins.
Yes.
And we're just excited about promoting her new book. And this book is unique. It's about her life story. It's sensitive, and we want to let you know when you read it, and it might open up some things. It might do some deliverance. It might open up some things you haven't been exposed or let out. And we just want to make sure that we have our psychotherapist here today, Meryl Littleberry, and her company is Tri-S Counseling and Education, and her phone number is 817-920-9321. We want to make sure that this is a sensitive area, and we want to make sure that if anything comes out that affects someone, that they need some help, they can get the help they can from this. So we're just going to give Ms. Fern time to talk about your book.
Okay.
We want to open that up, and then we might jump in at some point to ask some questions, okay?
All right.
Okay.
Well, first I want to tell thank you, Sandra, for giving me this opportunity to share with the whole world, what God has done, how He has totally delivered me from mental illness disorder and from substance abuse disorder. I have gone through so many years of abuse, but I want to share with you today why I wrote the book. Okay, I wrote this book, one, because I wanted people to understand that even though you have a mental disorder, a substance abuse disorder, that you can be healed. And I wanted people to understand the trauma that I went through and the different experiences that I had to go through and the trials and tribulations that I went through to get to where I am. In the very beginning, I started being abused when I was around 5 or 6 years old. The first person that abused me was my cousin. She started abusing me first, and then from that point, 3 or 4 different.
I think it's really neat, and that you said she, because immediately when she said she, I want to make sure that the audience heard her say she.
Yes.
Because we immediately think, oh, she was, we have a female that was abused. It must have been a man. That it has to be a man, and that females do not have this predisposition to do something like that. So first of all, that sometimes is even harder because now the first person was the same sex. Now we even question.
Yes.
Oh, did I like that? And am I possibly questioning my sexuality? But I think that's a really important thing, that it was a female that violated, and that's a nurturing kind of thing. So immediately your idea of what a female should do at a very young age got questioned.
Yes, and I definitely agree with you, Dr. Merlin. I thank you so much for bringing out that point. And that was something that did happen to me because she was my cousin, and I consider her to be my very best friend. And then when she started doing those things, it really made me question, who I was. Was I a girl? Was I a boy? Do I like this? Do I do not like this? And then she started to be abusive. They started abusing me and my sister by placing us in a closet, and they would leave us in the closet for hours at a time. Their mother was at work and their father was at work, and they would leave us in the closet and call us scallywags, call us every name you could possibly think of, and then they would bring me out of the closet, and then they would make me call my sister names. So from that point, I started to really feel that I was confused. I didn't know, do I love my sister? Am I supposed to hate my sister at this point? I didn't know if I should tell my aunt, should I tell my mom what's going on? Because my mother wasn't stable. So because my mother wasn't stable, I didn't know if I told, am I going to get put out of here? Are we going to have a safe place to live? What's going to happen from this point? So as a child, I was always very, very confused. And my mother also abused me as well. Whenever she was busy and something she needed to do, or if she needed to run an errand. And I talked a lot as a kid. So my mother would place me in the closet, and it was a pantry closet. So that made it even worse because now I'm under this shelf and I'm in a fetal position, and I'm trying to figure out at this point, okay, am I a bad person? Am I, what am I doing to make people treat me this way? So I still didn't stop talking. So what I started doing in the closet was basically finding my happy place. Okay, at least I'm in the closet now. Nobody's calling me names. Nobody is sexually abusing me anymore. So I was in a safe place. So I began to believe that as long as I'm in this closet, sometimes I would even act out. So I could be placed in the closet, you know. And so my mom would place me there, and that's when I started to see things in the closet. You know, I didn't know what it was, you know, back then. And so I would just like to say, very early on, the abuse became normal for me. And then after that time frame, I think around about first or second grade, my mom went to prison. So when my mother went to prison, we had to live with one of her friends. And when we were living there, my sister at that point, my sister's 6 years older than I am. So my sister was basically like my caretaker. And as we were living at this particular place, the nephew started, you know, trying to molest me, but his mom caught him. And so she started, you know, hollering at me and calling me names and telling me, you know, don't you ever do this again. So in the back of my mind, I'm like in the first or second grade. I'm thinking, okay, well, did I cause this? You know, was I the reason that this happened? So very early on, I started to feel depression. I started having a lot of anger. And
What was it that you seen in the closet? You said I started seeing things.
well, I would see shadows. I would hear voices.
Happy, sad, mean? What do you remember?
Well, when I was smaller, they were happy. Okay, I would hear happy voices. But when I got older, I started hearing voices tell me to kill myself or to hurt someone else. So they went to being from a happy place to an unhappy place. During this abuse, as I stated before, my mother went to prison, so we had to stay with her friend. And from that point, my mother came home from prison. So when my mother got out of prison,
How many years? Like how long?
I don't really remember. Maybe a year or so she was in prison, because she was in federal prison. She went to prison, and she met this guy, and at this point we moved with him. And so once we moved with him, he didn't abuse me, but he abused my sister. And so my sister, I used to hear her crying because, you know, she was a kid.
And that feels like being abused.
You know, and so
anyway, yeah.
I didn't tell her that what was happening to me, and she didn't tell me what was happening to her until we became adults. So, long story short, this guy was very abusive towards my mom, so he used to like beat my mother. My mother was a nurse at that time, and so they got into this really, really big confrontation, and he went downstairs and got in the car. And my mother couldn't drive, by the way. So when my mother went downstairs, she was, you know, they were having a verbal altercation, and my sister and I were standing upstairs. And
When you're seeing it, like I can see you looking at it. Do you see it first person, or do you see it like it's a movie at this point?
I see it as first person.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of times when people process through abuse, you separate, and that's part of that compartmentalizing that we're able to then look at it like a movie. You still see it like you're there.
Mm-hmm.
There's processing still that has to happen
Mm-hmm.
because you're there. You can see everything about you. Talking about it, you're there. And when we process through that kind of abuse, you kind of it's a healing way that your brain separates, and you see it almost like it's like a movie, that you're not there. You're still there.
Yes.
That was some intense.
Feel like that sometimes.
And I imagine it goes back and forth.
And once he hit my mom, she flies over this apartment building and she drops down. So
He hit her with the car?
He hit her with the car, and my mother was rushed to the hospital. We were moved back to my aunt's house, and so we stayed there for a while. My mother got out.
Was she okay? Like,
No, she wasn't okay. She had to go through therapy and learn how to walk again, and she had cast on. I mean, she was really damaged, really bad. So she went from that to eventually she got went through the therapy and she was healed. But my mother had
you guys became caregivers then, right? Then who's
n-
taking care of
my
mom?
sister.
She and
My sister ended up helping my
Okay.
mom. So from this point, we moved to the Riverside Village, and that's what's in my book, What's in the Closet. I talk a lot about the Riverside Village because we lived in 4 different apartments there. And in those apartments, if you ever seen the movie New Jack City, you've seen the Riverside Village. Okay? So in the Riverside Village, The first apartment we lived in, we lived with, I won't call this, I won't use any names. Every name that I will use would be a fictitious name because some of those people are still living. Okay. So the first guy, he's deceased. He was abusing my sister. My mother didn't, finally, we moved away from him. And she met another guy. Well, when she moved in, we moved in with this guy. He's deceased as well. He started trying to have a relationship with my sister sexually. But by this time, my sister was like maybe 14, 13 or somewhere off in there. So she ran away. My sister ran away. And so she would run away, come back, run away, come back. But what he was doing is he had established a relationship with me. So he was really nice. He always bought me toys. He always gave me nice stuff. And buy me ice cream. He would buy me ice cream all the time because the ice cream truck, back then the ice cream truck used to come around. So he would come, always be really nice to me and be nice to my friends. But one night we were home and he asked me if I would get undressed. And so I'm like, oh, I felt.
How old were you then?
I was in the third grade.
It's a lot to happen before.
And so I did, and he had all these.
He baited you in.
Yeah. He did all these sexual acts or whatever, and I want to talk about what happened because for many years, if I see, even to this day, if I see anything spilled on the floor, I am going to stop and wipe it up. It irritates me to the utmost because he used to drop the semen on the floor going to the bathroom. And so it would
trigger.
For me, yeah, it was a trigger. For me, it became a trigger. And I was never able to phantom in my mind. I felt so betrayed by him, and I felt so nasty. I just felt dirty all the time.
That confusion, the other people you can kind of see as bad people. They did mean things. This guy was nice. You're nice, and you care about me, and you show me.
He's in a
love.
relationship with your mother.
Yes, and he was kind. How do kind? Because part of our brain can say, "Ooh, you're a bad person. You do bad things," but you're a nice person. Why are you doing bad things? So that confusion is intense. And third grade.
And at this time, I want to add that there was a lady in our life that owned a daycare, and she used to pick me up and take me to church. And so I remember me telling him, God's going to get you for this. And he said, I will never forget this as long as I live. He said, if God was real, I couldn't do this.
Another bait.
There is no God. And at that time, I believed him. I thought about it. I was like, oh my God, he's right. There is no God. So over my lifespan, for a very long time, not lifespan, but for a very long time, I didn't believe in God anymore. Of course, I didn't go to church. And I don't know how long the show is, so I want to kind of speed up a little bit to some more areas. My mother's he sold marijuana, by the way. So my mother started stealing marijuana from him. And eventually she accumulated enough where we moved out of his place into our own place. When we moved into that place, my mother, if anybody in turn...
Why did she want to get away? He was abusive to her?
I don't know. Yes, he was abusive to her, but I knew she wanted to get away from him. And I heard her tell someone that she was stealing his marijuana so we could get away.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So once we moved out of his place, we moved into a place in the Riverside Village. And my mother became known as Marijuana Mama Curlin Sue. And so there would be people lined up almost a block buying marijuana from my mom. And it was continuously. All day long, all night long, people would be there. And I would be in the room, and my mother would give me money, and I would catch a train to Odessa, and I would pick up the marijuana and I would bring it back.
How old were you then?
I was in the 4th grade. I wasn't.
You couldn't catch a train by yourself in the 4th
Yes, you
grade?
can. My
You
mother.
was 10.
Yeah, back in the 70s, you could be on the VIP section and you could catch a train and go.
She made you out a little
Yeah.
drug dealer at 10.
So I would go to Odessa, pick up the marijuana, and I would bring it back. Help my mom cut up marijuana. In my house, it was common to smoke weed, drink alcohol. And at that time, I was drinking MD 2020, Mickey's beer, smoking marijuana. By the time I was in the 6th grade at Morningside Middle, I was a full-blown addict. I was a full-blown addict.
All right. Introduced to it through the family.
Through my mom. And so I'm not going to tell them everything that's in what's in the closet. You would have to go to Amazon and get your copy.
And you have your book signing at
Yeah.
3600 Horn
Yes.
Street. What date is that?
February the 9th, I will be having my book signed here at 3600 Horn Street at Opening Doors for Women in Need. And thank
At
you,
3
thank you,
o'clock.
thank you.
It's
From
at
3
3
o'clock
o'clock, right?
to 5:30 p.m. But I want to talk a little bit about, I go from 6th grade, now we're maybe in the 7th, 8th grade, somewhere off in there. My mother had hired a cab drivers because my mother couldn't drive. So we had 2 different cab drivers that would take us different places. So my mother would just call, and really I didn't have to do any calling. They just took me and they waited. They would wait. One of them's name, he's in the book. I almost called his name. He's deceased now, was a pedophile. So when he would take me to school, he would say, you're pretty. I like your dress. He would ask me to take pictures, and he would snap pictures of me. And in the beginning, I thought it was cool because it's like, yay, and I'm taking all these really cool pictures. And then he started saying, let me take pictures of your breast and, and pose this way and pose that way. And so finally, I just got to the place to where I just started just cussing him out, I started using so much profanity. I would cuss him out all the way to school and all the way back. But on the outside of my life, if you knew my family, because my mother sold marijuana on the south side at this point, but I lived in the Meadowbrook area. Okay. And so the schools saw me come to school in this cab. My mother was a Neiman Marcus fan. She was like their Raven fan, right? And so I had on 3-4 carat diamond rings. I wore expensive coats. My mother dressed me like a little princess. And if you looked at my life from the outside, you would never ever notice that I was going through so much pain. My grades were good because my mother did require that I make good grades. By the time I was in high school, my mother got busted. And so when she got busted, we had to give away everything, and we started living in different motels. I won't name all of them, but we lived in most of the motels around Tarrant County. From that point, we were at a particular motel, and my mother told me she was going to go outside to get some soda. And she went out, but she didn't come back. And so I'm in the room, and I'm thinking, man, she's been gone a long time. So I just go ahead and go to sleep. And the next morning, when I woke up, my mom had her head covered up. And so I said, Mama, he's deceased now. I said, Mr. So-and-so is here to pick me up. And so she said, go ahead and get ready. And I said, Mama, what's wrong? And so she said, somebody kidnapped me last night. I said, well, did they do anything to you or hurt you or anything? Well, they did. She didn't tell me at that time. She told me years later what they did to her. But that particular day, she told me that they just shaved off all of her hair. And so they shaved off all of her hair. I went to school. And at that time, I was going to Eastern Hills. I was in Eastern Hills High School band. I played the clarinet. And I played the clarinet at Meadowbrook Middle School, too. So I was really proud of that.
Was that an escape also? Like to be able to have something where you got better? I mean, I would
Yes.
imagine you created your own world in that because you can get better, you create music.
Yeah,
Something
but the only
beautiful.
thing for me at that point is I couldn't play a note. I just pretended
Oh,
like I was playing.
I didn't know you could do that. Okay.
Well, my band teacher knew it. She was like,
She caught on.
she was like, Fern, are you playing this clarinet? And I will. Her name was Miss Gillum. I love Miss Gillum because she took an interest in me. She really did. And she said, I'm gonna teach you how to play the clarinet. And so she taught me a few notes. I actually won a little trophy about this VA
Best
when I was in the
improved.
when I was in the 8th grade. But anyway, we're in high school now. And my mother take me from Eastern Hills because we had to move from motel on the south to the motel on Motel 6 on Oakland by the church. So we moved over there, and by this time my mother is really running out of money. So I had to walk every day because I was going to Dunbar High School at the time. So I would walk from Oakland Street to Dunbar.
That's
And,
a long way. That's a long way.
This white guy, he started picking me up. He was like, I see you walking every day, and I think I'm going your way. You know, I won't bother you or anything. I just hate to see a young girl walking. And I was reluctant at first. I was like, no, I'm good. So the next time, I was so tired. I was like, you know what? Okay, that's good. You know, so I got in the car, and he was like, well, you know, he asked me if I wanted to have sex, and I just jumped out the car. And he was like, you're going, you know, stop. And I just started cussing him out, and I just walked on to school. And I went to school every day. And the girls used to pick on me so bad because I wore nice clothes. They had not a clue that I was living in a motel, and I would go home some days and would not even have food to eat. They didn't even know. And but I had one teacher named Mr. Hudson. He was very nice to me. And I was in his geometry class. So finally my mom, she met this other guy. He was a dealer, and we moved from there. My mother took me out of Dunbar, and she put me in R.L. Pascal. I forgot. I went to R.L. Pascal first, then I went to Eastern Hills, then I went to Dunbar, then I went back to R.L. Pascal. And we're living back on the south, and this time we're not in a really good area. We're on Betsy Street. Okay.
Where's your sister?
My sister by this time was a heroin addict, so my mom had kicked her out.
Okay.
So I need to say this, that my mother always treated me like I was special. You're special, you're beautiful, you can be anything. You're better than your sister black, your sister ugly. She's never gonna be anything. And those are the words that she always said to my sister. And that always hurt my feelings because I loved my sister. I forgot to share that my sister started using when she was about 15, heroin. And she kept going back and forth to jail. But back then, I was about 12, 13 years old when I started visiting my sister at Tarrant County Jail, because back then they didn't have an age limit. So I would just go to the jail, sit in the line, and they would let you go in, and I would go and visit my sister and take her money. Now, I'm back at R.L. Pascal High School. My mother by this time has bought me a car, and I'm still, going back and forth to Dunbar and O.D. Wyatt and doing all the stuff I'm not supposed to do. But I'm keeping my grades up. So they opened up this club out here in Como. And so my her thing was, as long as you be home by 12 o'clock, you're good.
And what age are we now?
I was about 16, 17, somewhere off in there.
Driving and clubbing.
Yeah, driving and clubbing. And so this particular time, my mom said, I don't know what's going on in the neighborhood right now. She said, so whatever you do, do not sell anybody any weed that you don't know. And I said, okay. But you know me, I'm a kid. I'm like, I just whatever, because whatever money, if my mother
So
wasn't
you
there,
went from being the pickup to selling somewhere in between.
yeah, with my mom. So I could always sell no matter where. If she wasn't home, I could always sell it.
Okay.
That was no issue. So, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, whatever money I make is my money. So when she wasn't home, a guy knocked on the door. And when he knocked on the door, I had just ran up the stairs, and I opened the door, and I was like, hey, what's going on? And he said he wanted, I forgot what it was he wanted, but I sold it to him, but he was an undercover agent, and I didn't know it. So now they arrest my mom, but they really was going to arrest me. So my mom made a deal with the DA's office. If you lock me up and let my daughter graduate. So my mother, in the summer of my 11th grade year, my mother went to prison. So she went to prison when I was in the 1st grade, and she went to prison when I was in the 11th grade. So by this time, while she's in prison, I'm living in an apartment, but I go get a job. And so I had to become a thief because they sold jewelry. And so I'm like, okay, I'll just steal everything I want to steal, and I'll sell it on the streets, and I'll be able to take care of myself that way. But, you know, you can't do that too long. My managers finally realized, okay, this girl is stealing, and I didn't want to go to jail, so I quit. And I wrote my mom a letter, and I was like, the man that rented the apartment realized that I was not 18. So he said, I'm sorry. I know that you've been here with your mom, but I can't let you live here. So I packed up everything I could. I got robbed. I forgot I got robbed, but they left. I packed up everything I could and put it in my car. And so what I started doing from that point was just going to school, and I would go to the gym and take a shower and go to class. And so I got tired of sleeping in my car, and it was getting finna get cold. So I wrote my mom a letter, and I was like, I'm in my car, and I don't really know what to do. And so my mom wrote me back, and she said to go to this guy's house on Hattie Street. So I went and knocked on his door, and I said, I'm Carolyn Sue's daughter. My mom told me to come over here, and I showed him the letter, and he just gave me a pound of weed. And he was like, here. He's like, your mama said to do it, so here you go. So he gave it to me, and I started, selling weed here and there, and it was enough for me to stay afloat. And I just rode around and sold weed or whatever. And I kept going to school. And then the school, somebody called the school and said that my mother was in prison. They reported me. Mm-hmm. So the school called me in the office, and I'll say my counselor's name. I love her. She lives in Como. Her name is Margie Majors. Mm-hmm. I thank God for Miss Majors. So Miss Majors came in the office. She spoke on my behalf, told them I was a good student, even though she was just trying to keep me in school. She even got me in the debutante program. I was a Jabberwock. I don't even know how, but I was. But my aunt came to the school. So when my aunt came to the school, my aunt told the principal, yes, she can stay with me. And so I'm like, yes, I can stay with Mom. So when we got outside, she said, you can't stay with me?
See you later.
She said, now, I got you back in school. I don't know where you're going to stay, but it won't be with me. So I'm like broken. I'm disappointed. And I go get in my car. So what I started doing was I went to this other guy. He was a big guy in town. I'm not going to say his name because his family is still here in Fort Worth. He was a big guy. And I walked in his establishment and I said, I'm Carolyn Sue's daughter, and I need help. And so he said, how old are you? I said, I'm 17. And he said, do you go to school? And I said, yes, sir, I do. He said, if I give you this, you got to go to school every day. I said, okay. He gave me an ounce. I took it to this guy, and I took him the money back, and I did that every day after school. I would just deliver for him, which kept money in my pocket.
But Fern, let's kind of pull it in a little bit, because I know you're sharing a lot of the story, and you do want them to read the book. Mm-hmm. Some questions I think about for you is, and for Merle is, why do you, for one thing, we see this family we see a family of issues, a family with. It amazes me how your mother used the pantry or the closet, but then also your cousins use the pantry and the closet. Where does that come from? Where this family is using a closet for punishment for children? That's one question I have. And then the drug abuse, it was a family initiated thing, but also from pain that you and your sister went through, because both of y'all went through this.
Yes.
And so it sounds like that this was initiated in the family. It was okay and comfortable to drink at an early age. So, Meryl, you want to add to that? Because that's what I want to get out here to people, are these issues in the family. And then why do you feel like you couldn't tell what was happening to your mother? Why do you feel like you couldn't tell?
Oh, well, the reason why I never shared with my mom what was going on with me is because my mother was extremely abusive. She cussed us out a lot. She called us names all the time. She would hit us with things. And because when my sister initially went to my mother and said, hey, so-and-so is trying to have sex with me, my mother said, you just fast. And she kicked her out. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, if I go and share with you what's going on, then you're going to kick me out. Where am I going to go? And with us being locked in the closet, I always felt like it was safer for me to be in the closet than to be being abused by you, whether it was verbally, physically, or sexually. It was safer for me.
One of the things you said is your mom always kind of built you up.
Mm-hmm.
So was she doing both of those? Because you said now she's very abusive and she's calling us names and she's saying really bad things, but your face kind of lit up when you said my mom always looked at me and said, you're the best one, you're the beautiful one. So when is always? Because now I'm
she does both.
She did.
My
Okay.
mother did both until the day she passed away.
Okay, that right there is the gap that creates. So just genetically we're wired to have a mom. We believe a mom is going to nurture, care, and protect. So if they don't do that, there's already a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
What we don't expect is that they're going to create harm, hurt, hinder, put us in a place. If you have that, the deficit that you have is so much bigger than people will see. It's one thing for mom not to protect. The brain already doesn't understand that. But to take it to the level where mom hurts. So now you have what we would say in therapy words is like this borderline personality, where there's a great book called I Hate You, Don't Leave Me, where you're the queen, you're the best thing ever, and you love how that feels. So you'll do whatever it takes to keep that feeling. But then all of a sudden you're dirt, you're this, you're fast. And so your brain says, well, you were real serious when you said that. Did you mean that? Mm-hmm. Because you're real serious now when you're saying this to me. And so the brain, you feel like you're going crazy, but your brain is reacting as normal as possible to a crazy situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really big difference, because I can imagine all those times that's what happened in that dark room, is the brain is trying to make sense out of something that doesn't make sense. So you feel I'm going crazy. The brain saying I'm trying to make sense of a crazy situation. And that's where you started developing all of those little words and talks and things, because that's not what mom does. Mm-hmm. Moms don't do this, and they definitely don't do this. So in that process, how did you, because we can make the same mistakes our parents did,
yes,
or we can correct them. At what point because you said it became normal. It became familiar. I don't think it ever became normal, because somewhere in you, like you knew, even when you were talking about the Caucasian guy driving up and the girls teasing, for whatever reason, something about that, you got very emotional in that moment. And I think because you knew something about that in me, this isn't normal, but it has become my familiar.
Mm-hmm, yes.
When do you think you recognize, looking back?
Tell us when it turned around for you.
It turned around for me 3 years ago.
Our time is running.
Yes, okay.
Tell us when it turned
3 years
around.
ago, I can say this in about 10 minutes. 9 years ago, I got married. All right. And once I got married, my children told my husband, there's something wrong with mom. We just don't know what it is. because I would buy them everything you could possibly think of, and at the same time I would just beat them crazy. So when my husband moved into the house, my husband retired from the military after 21 years. He monitors everything. He took a tablet and he wrote down every time I did something, no matter if it was abnormal behavior. He would write it down. If I screamed, if I cussed, if I went off, if I fought, whatever I did, he wrote it down. And then he took me to a doctor and he said, these are the things that I have observed my wife doing. My wife needs help.
Powerful.
Wow, yeah.
That's great.
Okay, so when I got to the doctor, I told the doctor, he's making that up. Okay, I am not that way. Because in my mind, I wasn't. I was a nice, kind person. Okay, and so my doctor said, well, why don't we put you on some medication? Well, I got on the medication and I can see the changes, right? I could see me getting better, but because I was a Christian, I didn't want to take the medication. I wanted to lay my hands on myself and pray my deliverance. Okay? And so I did that off and on. I would pray, I would fall off the wagon. I would pray, I would fall off the wagon. And it wasn't until I finally began to work with a therapist to find out that I had schizophrenia and that I was suffering from mixed bipolar disorder. Then when I realized that I had a mental illness, then I started to do a little research on it, and I found out I had a problem. But I had to go to treatment 7 times before I was able to come to the realization that I had a problem. Now, for the substance abuse disorder, because I dealt with that, I was clean for 13 years, and then I relapsed. And I relapsed because I didn't know I had a mental illness.
Well, the drugs silence the voices.
Yes. So once I started using again, the mental illness got worse and the substance abuse disorder got worse. And then it wasn't until I stopped using and started taking the medication consistently along with prayer, okay, and then God was able to deliver me. But for me, it was a process. I know some people want to say, well, I woke up one day and I was just delivered. It didn't happen that way for me.
Well, most people say that it's
It was a
that
process.
case. It's a process.
First, God showed me, I would say the Holy Spirit, not God. First of all, the Holy Spirit showed me where my anger stemmed from. Okay? Then he showed me through the sexual abuse, I confronted my abusers. I went to them, knocked on their door, and I said, hey, you know that you did A, B, C, X, Y, Z to me. I want an apology.
Wow.
Did you get one?
I got one. I got
from
2.
each person?
No, from 2.
The ones
Yeah,
that
the
you
other
did,
4 I didn't, but from 2 I did.
the 4, did they deny it or what?
Yeah, they're denying it. But yes, I did from 2. And so now I want to share that because once I got the apology, I still was not ready to release the anger. And so since I wasn't ready to release the anger, I still dealt with the mental illness, right? Because I was so mad. So I'm still hearing these voices. Kill yourself. Kill someone. I mean, I was literally hearing this in my head. A man and a woman holding a full conversation.
Did you stop? You weren't on your medicine then?
I wasn't on my medicine. And so once I started taking the medicine, then I became stable. But also another thing with me, excuse me, I want to share about my mom. My mom, I believe, had a mental illness because my grandmother had a mental illness. Okay? So I believe that my mother had a mental illness that she would not acknowledge because before she passed away, the doctor had prescribed her the same medication that I had been prescribed. And she wouldn't take hers. And my sister had been prescribed the same medications and she wouldn't take hers. But I've been taking mine now consistently for almost 4 years.
Do you find that common that, well, I know when younger people, they don't want to take their medication, even if, with Christians, yes, we have prayer, but God put the medicine here for us to help.
Well, I think she brought up a really neat point. She was like, I put my hand here and over here and said, deliver me. But the thing that you said, faith without works
Is dead.
And so, we're having that one part, but hey, what are you going to do about it? You're asking for something. What are you ready to do for it? With any diagnosis, be it mental illness or even physical, how many people do you know stop their insulin? Ooh, I feel better. I'm going to be able to do this. I'm going to think the, diabetes out of my body. When you start feeling better after taking any kind of medicine for bipolar, for schizophrenia, wow, you know what? I think I'm just really better. And so there is that desire to say, maybe it wasn't that, and now I'm okay. So it's almost like a very common thing to say, maybe I'll try it that one more time.
Yes.
But after some point, when you realize, yes, this is what it is, and I accept this, and then I see it as my opportunity to grow from it. How do I become better with this? I mean, no different. I can't put deodorant on Monday and hope that it keeps on working all the way to Friday. So there are some things that we do every day for a reason, but you had to actually experience that. I'm glad you said about sister and mom also having it, because I started wondering, I wonder which person could go through what you went through and not hear the voices fight in your head and split to say, why me? Over and over and over again. So I almost wonder, because, hearing voices, a lot of times, we are going to put that in schizophrenia, which is a genetic disposition,
Yes.
which can, be, but I don't know how many years of this cycled abuse happen. So I really kind of always want to step back and say, did this become created because of the traumatic events that you constantly went through, which also I believe mom went through, and the likelihood if mom went through because your aunt did too, because it was your aunt's kids, right? Was it? So when you start piecing all these little things together, everybody had some dysfunction, and there was not a stopping place where they finally broke that generational curse until your husband came in and said, hey, this don't feel right. Something's not, but it was him that stepped in. God delivered it sounds. I'm not sure how he got even through your titanium wall to even let him that close to you. So sometimes I want to step back. If everybody had these things, maybe there was a predisposition to schizophrenia. But my gosh, to have so much trauma, I can't say that I'm going to conclude that. But the medicine will still do the same thing. But man, who wouldn't have a fight in their head constantly if all of these things happen? You, your sister, your cousins, your aunt, all of the females in that entire circle had abuse on every level.
Yes. I also want to share with the substance abuse disorder, because it started when I was like 10 years old. I may have been 9 or 10 years old, and I stayed clean for so long. And then when I went back, I had to really learn about the addiction. I had to learn about my triggers. I had to learn about the behaviors that I had. There were certain things that I could smell. There were certain people I could be around. There would be, like I said, if I saw something spilled on the floor, it would just re-traumatize me all over again. So I have to really protect myself now, and I'm very knowledgeable about substance abuse. I'm very knowledgeable about mental illness, and I'm very aware of my behaviors. If I start to act out in a certain way, or certain things start to appear or happen to me, I'll automatically do an assessment. And this is how I maintain my recovery.
Great.
And I have
Right.
a very strong support group, And I want to say with my husband, yes, my husband is a praying man, and I thank God for him. And in the beginning, we've been married 9 years. But the first 5 years, my husband lived in complete chaos. I was the abuser. And I want to share that with the whole world. I was the abuser. I would fight my husband like he was an enemy. And my husband would stand with his hands on his hips, and he would say, get it out.
Wow.
He would put his legs straight out, and he would say, get it out. Hit me as many times as you want to. Get it out. Get it out. And then he would say, in the name of Jesus,
Wow.
I pray deliverance over you. And he would just go into intercessory prayer.
Wow.
And I would be he would lay me on the bed, and he would lay on top of me, and I would just be screaming, hollering, and kicking and crying. And he would say, I'm not your enemy. I love you. And I would say, no, you don't. I heard you say you hate me. And he wouldn't have been saying any of that. But in my mind, that's what I heard.
Because he treated you nice.
Because
loved
he
you.
treated me
And
nice.
you have an
And
example
you
of it in your
weren't used to that.
past.
Yes.
Yeah, you have an
Yes.
example. I know. I'm
Yeah.
just waiting for you to do
Yeah.
that. I'm curious. How are your kids? Because you talked about what kind of how are the kids?
Whew, I have 3 children. My children, my oldest son, Corey, is a very successful young man. But he endured a lot of trauma too. He was just strong enough to make it through it. Overcome. And he's very supportive. He's so proud of me. My second son, his name's Isaiah. His father had custody of him from the time he was 4 months old up until he was an adult. He was allowed me to message him, but he don't message me on Facebook anymore. He blocked me. But he told me, we had a conversation. He said, Mom, I love you, but I'm just not ready right now.
And you searched for him for a long time.
I searched for him
remember
for
you were
7 years.
Searching for him.
Yeah, and a lady messaged me on Facebook, and that's how I found him. I was able to meet him in person, go to his graduation, and but right now he's just not ready. I'm just waiting for him. And my youngest son, Trenton, Trenton grew up with me being sober, okay? And then I relapsed. And when I relapsed, it absolutely ruined his life. He is still trying to recover 4 years later. We have no open line of communication. He talks to his brother, but he doesn't talk to me. He called me a couple of days ago and said, Mom, I really love you. I love you. But he's angry. He's angry. So
it takes time to
heal. It takes time
for children to heal, and I've seen it with many women through abandonment with children and the issues, but I've seen it so many resolutions with family through these. Just keep showing them. If you keep showing them, the forgiveness will be there. They love you. They're telling you they love you.
Yes.
So I hope this show has helped today, and we just want to commend you, Fern, for sharing. It's hard to put all your life out there like that and all the issues she had. She don't get it twisted now. I know she shared a lot of the negative things, but she's a minister at our church at the Potter's House of Fort Worth, and she's continuously growing and doing things for healthy and ministering to other women that help. And she shared that people are getting delivered and also getting help after reading this book.
Yes.
So Fern Jenkins.
Yes.
And What's in the Closet.
What's in the Closet.
And then also we know this might have stirred up some issues that you haven't addressed, and we want to make sure that you get the help you need. Merle Littleberry at Tri-S Counseling and Education, and we want to make sure that if you need help, please reach out to any one of us. We all have Facebook accounts. I'm Sandra Stanley. What you gonna do with that lemon? And then also Sandra Renee Stanley Ministries is where you're gonna find this YouTube video. So we just thank you for tuning in, and if you like to be on our show and you have an interesting topic, we just want to share things that probably they're not, because we're all spiritual here, that they're not talking about in the church. We want to address those topics and get it out there so people know that they're not alone. And we also want, maybe today, that it's a little girl out there that's afraid to share something that's, or a boy, that's something that's going on with them that they can share with someone, and they shouldn't feel guilty about sharing. So let us know. And what are you going to do with that lemon? Thanks again for joining us today at What Are You Going to Do with That Lemon? So if you want to reach out to me and be on our show, you can get me at my Facebook, Sandra Stanley, or just get me at my website. Thanks again for joining us.